On the bustling space station of Drax 12, where humans and aliens lived side by side, a strange and unexpected event was about to unfold. The station was a hub of trade and diplomacy, with representatives from dozens of alien races. Among them was Baron Zarek, a towering alien with a reputation for arrogance and wealth. He had visited Drax 12 many times before, his business dealings always successful, and his pride in his own species' superiority was well known across the galaxy. Today, however, Zarek had a new gift to present, one that would change the life of a human engineer in ways no one could foresee. David Reed was an average human, a skilled engineer who worked on the maintenance of the station's power grids. He wasn't particularly special, at least not in the way that some of the more powerful figures in the galaxy might be. He didn't care much for the alien politics that swirled around him. His work was simple but important, and that was all he needed. As he walked through the busy corridors of the station, his mind on his next project, David was interrupted by a loud, booming voice. Human. The voice belonged to Baron Zarek. David turned to find the towering alien standing with a woman beside him, her body stiff and unmoving. David raised an eyebrow. Baron Zarek, what's this about? With a wide, smug grin, Zarek gestured to the woman. This is my daughter, Lady Vera. She's a bit of a problem. You see, paralyzed from the waist down due to an old injury, she's become quite the burden to me. But I believe you humans might have a solution. Perhaps you can do something useful for once. David stared at the woman. Her eyes, despite her immobile body, held a sharp intelligence. She seemed aware of her surroundings, but her body betrayed her, frozen in place, unable to move. The sight of her left David with a feeling of deep empathy. He could tell she was not some helpless creature. She was a person, trapped by her body. You want me to fix her? David asked, his voice cautious but curious. Zarek chuckled, a deep and rumbling sound. Fix her? No, I don't think you could. This is more of a joke. I'm curious if a human like yourself can even begin to understand alien biology. Consider it a challenge. If you can help her, then perhaps you'll have proven your worth. But I doubt it. David felt his chest tighten with both anger and a desire to prove the Baron wrong. He had always despised how some of the aliens treated humans as lesser beings, dismissing them as inferior. But here was an opportunity to show that humans were more than just creatures to be pushed around. David stepped closer to Lady Vera, her eyes following his every movement. She said nothing, but there was a sense of quiet dignity in her gaze. He didn't see a burden. He saw a person trapped by circumstances, just like anyone else. He knelt beside her, inspecting her condition with the trained eyes of an engineer. Zarek's laughter echoed behind him. Go on, human. Work your magic. I'll be here, enjoying my amusements. David ignored him. Instead, he focused on the task before him. He couldn't just walk away from this. There was something about Lady Vera, something that told him she wasn't hopeless. He had fixed broken machines, malfunctioning systems, and impossible problems before. Why should this be any different? He studied the subtle signs of the paralysis. It wasn't like a normal injury. The way her limbs remained stiff suggested that her nervous system had been somehow hijacked or blocked. If he could find a way to communicate with her neural pathways, maybe, just maybe, he could help her. David spent the next few hours working in silence, ignoring the occasional chuckles and snide comments from Zarek. He wasn't bothered. He was used to the skepticism from others, especially from people who thought they were above him. He would prove them wrong. It took some time, but David managed to find something that made sense. An alien neural interface technology that could bypass her paralyzed nerves. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. He carefully connected the device to Lady Vera's wrist, watching closely for any signs of movement or change. At first, nothing happened. Zarek's mocking laughter grew louder, filling the space with its echo. But then, a small movement. Lady Vera's fingers twitched. David's heart skipped a beat. He stared at her hand, his eyes wide in disbelief. Zarak fell silent. Another twitch. Then her fingers curled slightly, as if trying to grasp something. A spark of hope ignited in David's chest. Zarak's eyes widened. Impossible. David didn't respond to him. His attention was entirely on Lady Vera now, as her hand slowly lifted off the table, as though testing the movement for the first time. It was fragile, but it was real. Zarak stood motionless, his previous arrogance replaced by stunned silence. His daughter, the girl he had written off as a permanent burden, was moving. David's hands trembled slightly as he worked on fine-tuning the device, praying for more signs of success. Lady Vera's eyes met his. There was no mockery in her gaze, no bitterness, just the pure, quiet hope of someone who had been lost in the darkness and was finally seeing the light. David smiled gently. "You're not a burden," he whispered, his words just for her. He had no idea what this would mean for both of their futures, but one thing was clear: this was just the beginning. The next few days felt like a blur for David Reed. After that first, fragile movement from Lady Vera, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The small twitch of her fingers had given him hope, and now he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something incredible. As the human engineer worked tirelessly, trying to improve the neural interface he had connected to her, the alien Baron watched from a distance, his skepticism replaced by a quiet curiosity. He still couldn't understand what the human had done, nor did he care to try. But something about the sight of his daughter beginning to move, even just a little, was stirring. David's hands worked with focus, his mind calculating the complex alien technology in front of him. There was no room for error. He knew that Lady Vera's condition wasn't simple. The paralysis wasn't just a result of physical injury. Something in her neural system had been locked, shut off by a foreign device. He had to reverse that damage, and the path forward wasn't clear. Lady Vera lay still on the medical bed, her eyes closed, yet her expression was peaceful. She wasn't asleep. She was thinking, waiting. She could sense something had changed, and every small movement she made, whether it was a twitch of her fingers or a shift of her head, brought her closer to the world she had been cut off from for so long. It was a new feeling for her, this spark of hope, and it felt both strange and exhilarating. David took a deep breath, wiping his brow as he finished adjusting a small dial on the device attached to her wrist. He had been tinkering with it for hours, trying different combinations, reworking the alien tech piece by piece. He knew the risks. If he made the wrong adjustment, Lady Vera could be injured, but his instincts told him that he was close to unlocking the key to her recovery. "I don't understand." Zarak's voice broke the silence. He had been standing by the doorway, observing David's work with a mixture of amusement and impatience. "How are you doing this, human?" David didn't look up as he continued working. "I'm just doing what I can," he said, his tone calm. "It's not magic. It's science." Zarak grunted in response but said nothing more. David had already noticed that the Baron wasn't as dismissive as he once was. There was a hint of respect in his gaze, although it was hard to tell if that was for David himself or for the progress he had made with his daughter. Lady Vera shifted slightly, her head turning toward the sound of her father's voice. Her eyes locked with David's, and for the first time, she smiled, just a little. It was a small, soft thing, but to David, it felt like a victory. He adjusted the device again, checking its readings on the small screen next to him. The results were promising, but he needed more time. He needed to make sure he was getting it right. The neural pathways needed to be reconnected, but there was still something elusive about it. Over the next few days, David worked tirelessly, barely leaving the medical bay. The alien Baron had provided him with everything he asked for, from advanced materials to specialized equipment. But even with all the tools at his disposal, there was no guarantee of success. Still, David kept at it, driven by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. Lady Vera's condition slowly improved. Her fingers twitched again, followed by the faint movement of her legs. It was almost unnoticeable at first, but David was certain. She was getting stronger. Her nervous system was starting to respond to the adjustments he had made. The change was subtle, but it was enough to keep him going. Zarek, who had been watching the progress from the corner of the room, finally spoke again. "I must admit, human," he said, his voice begrudgingly respectful, "I didn't believe you had it in you. But this is beyond anything I expected." David glanced up at the Baron. His face was still hard to read, but there was no longer any trace of mockery in his voice. It was as if he had reluctantly accepted that the human was capable of so mething he himself hadn't been able to do. "Don't thank me yet," David said, offering the small smile. "We've still got a long way to go." Lady Vera's eyes met his again, and she seemed to understand. There was no doubt in her gaze now, only determination. She wasn't going to let herself remain trapped in her immobile body. She wanted to move. She wanted to walk. And David was the key to unlocking that. With each passing day, her movements became more fluid. She was able to wiggle her toes, stretch her legs, and even sit up on the bed. The joy that filled her heart was indescribable. For years, she had been confined to her immobile state, a prisoner in her own body. But now, thanks to this human's persistence and ingenuity, she could finally feel the world once again. David continued to refine the interface, his mind working tirelessly on the complex alien technology. He could see the potential in Lady Vera, a potential that no one had bothered to recognize until now. Her mind was sharp, her will strong, and now her body was catching up to her spirit. But just as David was starting to believe in their success, something unexpected happened. One evening, after a long day of work, he was sitting next to Lady Vera when a sudden jolt ran through the system. The device on her wrist flickered, and for a brief moment, her entire body spasmed violently. David leaped to his feet, panic rising in his chest. He quickly disconnected the device, trying to calm her. "Lady Vera, stay with me," he said, his voice urgent. "It's okay, just breathe." Zarek rushed to her side, his face filled with alarm. "What have you done to her, human?" he shouted, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. David held up his hands, trying to reassure the Baron. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice steady despite the panic inside. "She's not hurt. It's a setback, nothing more." Lady Vera's eyes opened slowly, her expression filled with confusion. She blinked, then smiled weakly at David. The moment passed, and the shock began to fade. She looked up at her father, her gaze steady and calm. "I'm fine," she whispered softly. David let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He looked at the alien Baron, who was still glaring at him with suspicion. "I'll fix this," David said, his voice firm. "We're not done yet." The challenge had just become more difficult. But David was not the kind of man to back down. He had a promise to keep, and he intended to keep it. Days turned into weeks, and David Reed's dedication never wavered. Lady Vera had come a long way since that first twitch of her fingers, but there was still so much left to be done. Every movement she made was a testament to his relentless pursuit of a solution, yet he knew it wasn't enough. Her body was still stiff, still resistant, as if the universe itself had decided to lock her away. But David wasn't someone to give up easily. He had promised to help her, and he intended to keep that promise. Lady Vera, now able to sit up unaided, watched David's every move with keen eyes. Her once empty gaze was now filled with anticipation. She wanted to stand, to walk, to feel the world beneath her feet. Yet she knew the journey wasn't over. The process was slow, but she felt a deep sense of gratitude towards the human who had never seen her as a burden. Each day, David made small adjustments to the neural interface he had designed. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was progress. The device had to work with her nervous system, connecting pathways that had been shut down. It required careful precision and patience, both qualities David had learned to perfect during his years as an engineer. But this was different. This wasn't just fixing a machine. This was about saving a life, restoring something that had been taken away. The alien Baron, Zarek, continued to watch from the sidelines, his eyes filled with disbelief. The human had done the impossible. The daughter he had once mocked as a hopeless case was now showing signs of recovery. And though Zarek still struggled to understand how this was happening, he had stopped ridiculing David. His pride was still a part of him. But now, there was something else, a grudging respect. David never acknowledged the Baron's change of attitude. He didn't care for praise or recognition. He just wanted to see Lady Vera walk again. That was all that mattered to him. One evening, after a long day of adjustments, David sat beside Lady Vera as she practiced moving her legs. It was slow, methodical work, but she was starting to gain more control. With David's help, she was able to bend her knees slightly, then stretch her legs out. Each small victory felt monumental. "How are you feeling?" David asked, watching her closely. Lady Vera smiled softly, her eyes bright with determination. "Stronger," she whispered. "I can feel more. It's like the world is opening up again." David nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had seen her progress firsthand, but hearing her speak about it made it feel even more real. The change wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. The hopelessness that had once weighed her down was beginning to lift. The next morning, something unexpected happened. As David arrived at the medical bay, he found Lady Vera standing on shaky legs. Her hands gripped the edge of the bed for support, but she was standing, not just sitting. Standing. David's breath caught in his throat as he rushed to her side. "Lady Vera, I can feel the ground," she interrupted, her voice filled with awe. "I can feel it, David. I'm standing." David's hands trembled as he reached out to steady her. "You're doing it. You're really doing it." Her smile was a mixture of joy and disbelief. "You did this. You made this possible." David felt a rush of emotions. He had spent so many days working on her. And now, here she was, standing on her own 2 feet. The impossible had become possible. But there was still so much more to do. This was only the beginning. Zarek entered the room just as David was helping Lady Vera back onto the bed. His expression was unreadable as he watched his daughter, who had once been a shell of herself, now moving with more confidence than ever before. "You," Zarek's voice faltered for a moment. "You actually did it." David turned to face the alien Baron, his expression calm but firm. "It's not done yet," he said, his eyes meeting Zarek's. "She still has a long road ahead of her." The Baron's gaze shifted from David to Lady Vera, and for the first time, there was no mockery in his eyes, only a deep, reluctant respect. "Perhaps I underestimated you, human," he muttered under his breath. "I will admit, I didn't believe this was possible." David didn't respond to the compliment. There was no need. It wasn't about proving himself to Zarek or anyone else. It was about Lady Vera, about giving her the chance to live a life free from the chains of her own body. Lady Vera, her face flushed with excitement, looked up at her father. "I'm not a burden anymore, Father," she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm not broken." The alien Baron's expression softened for a moment. For the first time in years, he truly looked at his daughter, not as a symbol of his failure, but as a person who could one day lead and inspire. The thought had never occurred to him, but now it seemed undeniable. His daughter was changing, and so was his view of her. David watched the interaction quietly, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in his chest. He had made a difference. His work had made a difference. But this moment, this small victory, was just one of many that would follow. The road ahead would be long, and there were still many challenges to face. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Hope for Lady Vera, hope for David, and perhaps hope for a galaxy that had long underestimated the power of a single human. The transformation of Lady Vera had already begun to stir whispers across the galaxy. What had started as a simple experiment by a human engineer had quickly turned into something far greater than anyone could have predicted. The daughter of Baron Zarek, once thought to be permanently confined to her bed, was now standing, moving, and showing the first signs of her former strength. But that was just the beginning. As the days passed, Lady Vera's progress accelerated. With each passing moment, her body regained more control, her legs stronger, her arms steadier. It was as though her body was remembering what it had lost, and it was pushing forward with newfound strength. David Reed, who had worked tirelessly to help her, couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. He had been part of something monumental. But what no one expected was just how much Lady Vera would rise from her condition. The skills she had once developed in her youth, when she was still able to walk and train in combat, began to resurface. Her mind had never been locked, only her body. And now, as she grew stronger, her abilities from her past life as a warrior began to show once more. Baron Zarek watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and disbelief. For years, he had been embarrassed by his daughter's condition, unable to do anything about it. He had tried everything: doctors, alien technology, even seeking out the greatest minds in the galaxy. But nothing had worked. Yet here was this human, a mere engineer, bringing his daughter back to life in a way that Zarek never thought possible. At first, Zarek had dismissed David as just another human, one who could never understand the complexities of alien biology. But as the days passed, his doubts began to fade. David had not only helped his daughter walk again, but he had also awakened something in her that Zarek had forgotten existed: strength, courage, and the drive to rise above her circumstances. "I never thought I'd see this day," Zarek said one evening, standing beside David as they watched Lady Vera practice her movements. David looked up at the Baron, a quiet pride in his eyes. "Neither did I." Lady Vera was walking now, taking slow, deliberate steps with the help of a support frame. It wasn't perfect, and she still needed assistance, but it was a monumental achievement. Every step she took was a sign of progress, and every movement filled her with a growing sense of purpose. For the first time in years, she was starting to believe that she could live again. "What will you do now?" David asked her one day as she practiced her steps. "What are your plans?" Lady Vera paused and looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I want to fight," she said simply. "I want to lead. I want to show the galaxy that I'm more than just the daughter of a baron. I have something to offer." David smiled at her words. He had always believed in her potential, but hearing her say it out loud filled him with pride. It was clear that Lady Vera wasn't just recovering. She was becoming something greater. The galaxy, which had once written her off as a burden, would soon know her name. News of her progress spread quickly. Soon, the galaxy's leaders and warriors were paying attention. Her story, a tale of recovery, strength, and determination, became an inspiration to many. It wasn't just about the miraculous healing of a disabled woman. It was about the rise of a legend. As Lady Vera's abilities continued to grow, so did her reputation. She became a symbol of hope, a beacon of strength for those who had been cast aside, forgotten, or overlooked. Her father, once embarrassed by her condition, now stood proudly by her side, watching as she began to command the respect of those around her. "You've become something extraordinary," Zarek admitted to her one evening, his voice laced with admiration. "I never expected this. I never thought you could do it." Lady Vera looked at her father, her expression thoughtful. "I couldn't have done it without the human," she said softly. "David didn't just heal my body. He gave me hope again. And now, I want to use that hope to change the galaxy." The alien Baron was silent for a moment, his mind racing. He had always viewed his daughter as weak, a casualty of his failure to protect her. But now, seeing her standing tall, full of purpose and ready to lead, he realized just how wrong he had been. Lady Vera was no longer a burden. She was a force to be reckoned with. As the days went by, The alien Baron took steps to position Lady Vera as a leader. Her training, which had once been interrupted by her injury, was now being resumed with renewed vigor. She was learning the ways of command, studying strategy, and preparing for the battles that lay ahead. The strength she had once shown on the battlefield, before her paralysis, was returning. She was becoming a warrior again, one who would lead not just her people, but perhaps even unite different species in the galaxy. Meanwhile, David remained by her side, offering guidance and support. His role had never been about fame or recognition. It had always been about helping a person who had been forgotten, who had been left behind. He never expected that he would be part of something as grand as this. But as he watched Lady Vera's transformation, he realized that sometimes the most unlikely people could change the course of history. And so, the legend of Lady Vera began to take shape. Her story would inspire millions, showing them that no matter the circumstances, no matter how impossible the challenge seemed, there was always hope. And in that hope, there was strength that could change the galaxy forever. Lady Vera stood at the edge of the observation deck, her eyes scanning the vast expanse of space. The stars, bright and distant, were like beacons guiding her toward a future she had never imagined for herself. It had been months since her recovery began, and in that time, she had become more than just the daughter of Baron Zorak. She was now a leader, a symbol of hope for countless beings across the galaxy. David Reed, the human engineer who had helped her stand again, stood beside her, his quiet presence a constant reminder of how far they had come. He wasn't just a mentor to her. He had become her closest ally, her friend, and perhaps even something more. But for now, they both understood that their focus had to remain on the future, not on themselves, but on what they could accomplish together. As Lady Vera grew stronger, so did her ambitions. No longer wanted to be a mere figurehead in her father's empire. She wanted to lead, to unite the fractured galaxy, and to show the universe that even the most unlikely individuals could rise to greatness. Her mind, sharp as ever, had already devised plans to bring the various alien factions together. And though her father, Zorak, had been wary of her aspirations at first, he had come to support her in ways she had not expected. But their journey wasn't going to be easy. Despite her rising influence, many still viewed Lady Vera's rise with suspicion. Some saw her as an outcast, a disabled woman who had defied the odds. Others saw her as a threat, a force that could disrupt the delicate balance of power that had long been established. There were even whispers among the elite that her success was merely a fluke, that it was David's work, not her own, that had made her into the woman she had become. It was this underestimation that would soon come back to haunt her. There were those who thought that because she was the daughter of Baron Zorak, they could control her, use her for their own purposes, but they didn't understand Lady Vera's strength or her resolve. One morning, as the sun rose over Drax 12, Lady Vera received a message from an unexpected source. A coalition of alien warlords who had been growing more aggressive with each passing day. They demanded her presence at an upcoming summit, where they intended to discuss terms of cooperation. On the surface, it seemed like an opportunity for diplomacy, a chance to further her goals. But Lady Vera knew better. The warlords saw her as a pawn, someone they could manipulate for their own gain. They underestimated her, thinking that her healing was the only thing she had to offer. David, as always, stood by her side. "You don't have to go, you know," he said softly, watching her as she read through the message. "We can find another way. You've already made your mark." Lady Vera looked up at him, her expression determined. "No, this is my moment. I can't let them think they control me. I won't be anyone's pawn." David nodded, understanding her decision. "Then I'll be there with you, every step of the way." The summit was held on a neutral planet, one far from the reach of any major faction. It was a place where alliances were forged and deals were made. As Lady Vera arrived, accompanied by David and a small group of trusted allies, she was met with a mixture of skepticism and condescension from the gathered warlords. They looked at her with disdain, dismissing her as nothing more than the disabled daughter of Baron Zarak. But Lady Vera wasn't fazed. She had been underestimated her whole life, first by her father, then by everyone who thought she couldn't overcome her disability. Now she would show them all just how wrong they were. The summit began with the usual discussions of trade agreements and military alliances, but Lady Vera, confident and poised, soon took control of the conversation. She didn't wait for the others to speak. Instead, she stood tall and addressed the warlords directly. "Enough talk of what you want from me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's talk about what I want. You think you can control me, but you are mistaken. I've spent my life proving people wrong, and I will continue to do so." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment there was silence. The warlords were taken aback by her boldness, by the sheer force of her presence. They had expected a weak, passive woman, someone they could manipulate for their own ends. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Lady Vera had never been weak. She had merely been waiting for the right moment to rise. "I came here not to make deals, but to forge a new path," she continued. "A path where we stop dividing the galaxy by power, by species, and by wealth. A path where we stand together as one. If you want to follow, then do so. But if you plan to stand in my way, know that I will not hesitate to take action." The warlords were silent for a long moment, and then one of them, an older alien with a reputation for ruthlessness, spoke up. "You think you can unite us? A woman like you?" Lady Vera met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes, I do. I don't need your approval to lead. I lead because I believe in something greater than your petty wars and schemes. This galaxy deserves more than that." The tension in the room was palpable, but Lady Vera remained calm. She had faced worse, far worse, than a room full of condescending warlords. She had faced her own limitations, her own fear, and had come out stronger on the other side. She was no longer the woman who had been confined to a bed, a prisoner of her own body. She was the leader of a new generation, one that would rise above the past and create something better. Slowly, the warlords began to nod. One by one, they recognized the truth in her words. Lady Vera had done what they thought impossible. She had shown them strength, courage, and vision. They would follow her. As the summit came to a close, Lady Vera stood with her head held high. She had proven herself, not just to the galaxy, but to herself. She was no longer a symbol of weakness. She was a legend in the making. After the summit, Lady Vera's reputation soared. Her leadership at the gathering of warlords had sparked something in the galaxy, a new wave of respect for her abilities. News spread like wildfire. And soon, she wasn't just the daughter of Baron Zarak. She was becoming a symbol of hope, a rallying point for those who sought peace and unity in a galaxy that had long been divided. But with this newfound power came new dangers. It wasn't long before the alien Baron began to grow uneasy. Zarak, once proud of his daughter's recovery, had started to see her as a threat. He had always believed that his family's power was the foundation of his status, and now, with Lady Vera's rise, that foundation seemed to be shifting. He had allowed her to take the lead, thinking she would remain under his control, but now the tides were turning. She wasn't just his daughter anymore. She was becoming her own force in the galaxy. Zarak had never been a man of great affection for anyone, least of all his daughter. She was useful to him, a tool to help solidify his position among the galaxy's elite. But now she was pushing for more, wanting to lead, to unite the galaxy in ways he hadn't planned. And that was something he couldn't allow. One evening, as Lady Vera sat with David in her private chambers, discussing their next moves for the future, a message arrived from her father. He asked her to meet him in his study immediately. His tone was terse, almost cold, and for the first time in a long while, Lady Vera felt a pang of unease. "I don't like this," David said, reading the concern in her eyes. "Are you sure you want to go?" Lady Vera hesitated. She had always tried to stay true to her mission, to do what was right for the galaxy, even if it meant making difficult choices. But something about this meeting felt different. She didn't want to believe her father would betray her, but she knew that power often made people do strange things. "I have to go," she said finally, standing up. "He's my father. I need to hear him out." David nodded, though his concern was still visible. "I'll be with you, every step of the way." As they walked to the Baron's study, Lady Vera couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. She had come so far, fought so hard to regain control of her life. And now, her father, the one person she had tried to make proud, seemed ready to tear it all down. When they reached the study, Zarek was waiting. His posture was stiff, his face unreadable. He didn't greet his daughter the way he once had, with his usual smug arrogance. Instead, he simply motioned for her to sit. "I've been thinking, Lady Vera," he began, his voice colder than usual. "You've been making quite a name for yourself, haven't you? Leading these factions, rallying them to your cause. You've become quite powerful in your own right." Lady Vera sat down, trying to keep her composure. "Yes, father. I've done what I thought was best." Zarek's gaze flicked to David, standing by her side. "And you've had help. From this human, no less." David stood still, his expression calm but wary. He didn't know where this conversation was headed, but he had a sinking feeling that it wouldn't end well. Zarek leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. "You've forgotten who gave you everything, haven't you? I made you what you are. I helped you recover, gave you the tools to walk again. And now you think you can turn your back on me. You think you can go and lead a galaxy without my approval." Lady Vera's heart sank. She had feared this moment, but hearing it from her father's lips made it feel even more real. "What are you saying, father?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Zarek's eyes narrowed. "I'm saying that you owe me. You owe me your power, your position. And now I want something in return." Lady Vera's mind raced. "What do you want from me?" A smile spread across Zarek's face, but it was cold, calculating. "I want you to stop. Stop leading these factions. Stop pushing for unity. You've caused enough disruption. It's time for you to step aside, and for me to reclaim control of what's mine." The shock hit Lady Vera like a blow to the chest. She had never imagined that her father, the one person she had hoped would support her, would be the one to betray her. He wasn't just asking for her obedience. He was demanding it, using the leverage of her own recovery to manipulate her into submission. "No," she said, her voice firm despite the pain in her chest. "I will not stop. I've worked too hard, and I've seen too much. I won't let you take this away from me." Zarek's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Lady Vera feared he might strike her. But instead, he leaned back in his chair, his face impassive. "Then you leave me no choice," he said coldly. "You've outlived your usefulness. I will do what I must to take back control." Lady Vera's heart pounded in her chest. She realized then that her father didn't just want her power. He wanted her completely under his control. He wanted to break her, to bend her to his will, and if she didn't comply, he would destroy everything she had worked for. David stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. "You don't have to do this, Baron Zarek," he said, his eyes locked with the alien barons. "You don't have to betray your daughter." Zarek's gaze shifted to David, and for a brief moment, it seemed like he was considering his words. But then his lips curled into a sneer. "This doesn't concern you, human. Stay out of it." Lady Vera stood up slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I won't back down. I won't be controlled by you or anyone else." With that, she turned to leave the study, David following closely behind. As they walked away, Lady Vera's mind raced. She had known that her rise would come with challenges, but she hadn't expected her own father to be the one to stand in her way. The betrayal stung, but she knew that she couldn't stop now. If she wanted to change the galaxy, she would have to fight for it. Against her father, against anyone who tried to control her. The news of Lady Vera's defiance against her father spread quickly throughout the galaxy. It was a shocking turn of events. A daughter standing up to her father, a baron of great power, refusing to be controlled any longer. For years, Lady Vera had been seen as nothing more than a symbol of Zarak's power. Now she was becoming something entirely different, a symbol of resistance, strength, and hope for a galaxy tired of constant division and strife. But the Baron's betrayal had not been the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter. Lady Vera knew that the road ahead would be difficult, and that her father would not let go of his ambitions easily. He had always viewed her as a tool, but now she would prove to him, and to the galaxy, that she was much more than that. It had been a week since the confrontation in Zarak's study. Lady Vera and David had retreated to a secluded location, far from the reach of Zarak's influence, to plan their next move. She knew that she couldn't take on her father alone. She needed allies, people who believed in her vision and were willing to stand by her side. And so, she began to build her coalition, reaching out to those who had been pushed aside, who had been treated as lesser beings by the galaxy's powerful elite. It wasn't easy. Some hesitated, unsure whether they could trust her. Others were unwilling to risk angering Baron Zarak. But slowly, Lady Vera earned their respect, showing them that she was a leader who believed in justice, unity, and peace. She didn't want power for power's sake. She wanted to bring about real change, to create a galaxy where no one would ever be discarded or overlooked. David stood by her throughout it all, offering guidance and advice whenever she needed it. He had become more than just her mentor. He was her closest friend, someone she could rely on when the weight of her responsibilities felt too much to bear. "I can't do this without you, David," Lady Vera said one evening as they sat together in the command room of their new headquarters. "You've been with me from the beginning, and I owe so much of this to you." David smiled softly, his gaze warm. "You don't owe me anything. You've done all of this yourself. I've just been lucky to be part of it." Lady Vera shook her head. "You've helped me become who I am. Don't underestimate the role you've played in this." David chuckled lightly. "If you say so. But just know, whatever happens next, I'm with you. Always." As the days passed, Lady Vera's coalition grew. Leaders from various alien factions, who had once seen her as a mere curiosity, now recognized her for the strong, capable leader she was. Her ability to unite different species, who had been at odds for centuries, was no small feat, and with each new ally, her power grew. However, Zarak was not one to let his daughter's rebellion go unchallenged. He had underestimated her once, but he would not make that mistake again. He began to rally his own forces, gathering support from other powerful barons who shared his desire for control. The galaxy's delicate balance was on the verge of tipping into full-scale war. Lady Vera knew that the time was coming, the time when she would have to face her father and the power he had built head-on. She could no longer remain in the shadows, hiding from the inevitable confrontation. She had to act, for the sake of the galaxy and for the future she believed in. And so, the final battle was set into motion. A decisive meeting was called between Lady Vera and her father's forces, where they would negotiate the future of the galaxy. Both sides knew that this was not just a political meeting. It was a war for the very soul of the galaxy. Lady Vera had to make a choice, to continue fighting for peace, or to allow her father's greed and hunger for power to destroy everything she had worked for. The meeting took place on a neutral world, surrounded by a vast, desolate landscape. The air was thick with tension as Lady Vera and her allies stood across from Zarak and his supporters. There was no room for negotiation, no space for compromise. This was a fight for the galaxy's future. As Lady Vera stepped forward, her heart raced. She had never felt so certain of her purpose. Her vision for the galaxy, one where unity and peace were paramount, was within reach. But it would not come easily. Zarak was not someone who would surrender his power without a fight. "You've made a grave mistake, daughter." Zarak's voice echoed across the battlefield, filled with contempt. "You think you can lead. You think you can unite this galaxy. You're nothing but a puppet, and I'll make sure you realize that." Lady Vera stood tall, her voice unwavering. "I'm not your puppet, Father. I am the future of this galaxy, and I will not let you destroy what we've built." The battle that followed was fierce, but it was clear from the start that Lady Vera and her allies had the upper hand. Her leadership, her strength, and her belief in her cause inspired her forces to fight with everything they had. They knew that this was their chance to change the galaxy for the better. When the dust finally settled, Lady Vera stood victorious. Her father's forces had been defeated, and Zarak himself was taken captive. The galaxy, which had once been divided and filled with distrust, now had a chance to heal. Lady Vera's victory was not just a personal triumph. It was a victory for all those who had been oppressed, overlooked, and discarded. It was a victory for the future, for unity, and for the belief that anyone, no matter their background, could rise to greatness. As she looked out at the galaxy, now united under her leadership, Lady Vera knew that her journey was far from over. There would still be challenges to face, battles to fight, and enemies to overcome. But she also knew that she was no longer the helpless woman she had once been. She was a legend, a leader, and the future of the galaxy. And she would fight with everything she had to protect that future.